Part 182. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1816. Rabbit. Rabbit. The blood of the rabbit is taken, made into thrombus, and then injected into the rabbit. Take the rabbit's blood, let it coagulate slightly, make microthrombus, and then inject it into the rabbit's body. Inject serum from other animals, preferably non-Warcraft mammals such as cows, horses, sheep, etc., into the rabbit, causing the blood to clot into a thrombus. Poor Greet was not a psychiatrist in his previous life, and did not even have a master's degree in scientific research. He had to use the stupidest method to speculate on the principles of thrombosis, and toss animal models bit by bit according to the principles. If you toss one, one will die, if you toss one will die. What rabbit had its brain blood vessel punctured and died as a result? The rabbit's cerebral blood vessel was punctured. Although treatment was performed to stop the bleeding in time, he still died. The rabbit's cerebral blood vessels were not punctured, but for some reason, he still died. So much so that a large amount of dishes such as braised rabbit meat, stir-fried rabbit cubes, and spicy rabbit heads were added to the master's tower. Magicians who like food like it very much, but magicians who don't like food, such as the magicians of the magic control system, can't help but scold. Can you keep your hands steady? We don't know how many people are going to die if you use your brains like this. Gretel, no, your control department always uses craniotomy to study the effects of spells on the brain. Only when he studied medical skills himself did he realize how important scientific research ability is. Only with scientific research leading the way can a new path be explored for the treatment of various diseases, and only then can healers find a way forward. Otherwise, it would be too inefficient to rely on therapists to encounter various cases and then temporarily explore treatment methods. Moreover, busy therapists do not have time to start with basic research and animal experiments. Of course, he has now left the front line of the experiment and started a happy life where the boss just talks, and the subordinates break their legs. However, the necromancers responsible for the operation have to be responsible for the details. How long does it take to keep rabbit blood for thrombosis? To what extent does it have to solidify before it can be re-injected? Should whole blood be used for thrombus treatment, or should separated blood components be used? Do you make a large piece of coagulated blood in a test tube, then cut a small piece and inject it into the rabbit's blood vessel? Or inject the blood into some kind of thin tube, such as the vine tube you begged Miss Anevia to make, and wait for it to solidify before injecting? If injected, where on the rabbit should it be injected? Limb veins? Central vein? Inject directly into the cerebral blood vessels? Or, more vigorously, directly into the artery? It coagulates slightly and forms microthrombi. How long does this slightly last? Should the blood clot be broken up and stirred? How to judge whether this is a microthrombus? How big is micro? Horse serum, bovine serum, sheep serum, which one to use? How to prepare beforehand? How much to inject? Where to inject? Every detail requires these researchers to try it out bit by bit to form a standard process. The thrombolysis step that Grand Duke Rimmer is responsible for is only one part of the entire research process, and it is a very simple one. Surrounding him, there are a large number of researchers responsible for front-end, middle-end, and back-end work. Have you finished measuring the spell fluctuations? The measurement is done. This time we have specially sorted out the environment. There will be little interference. We should be able to get some useful data. That's good. Send it to the conjuration department quickly. The data measured last time had too much interference. The conjuration department complained to death, saying that the data with so much clutter was completely uninterpretable. Rabbit. Where are the rabbits? Don't burn bridges. You have to raise the rabbits. Feed these rabbits as long as you can, and try to make them live as long as possible. And the group that boils kelp extract is used to make medicine. Don't eat it secretly. If you continue to eat it secretly, you will be punished by going to the beach to fish for kelp. Team leader, we didn't eat it secretly, we confused ordinary kelp with magic plant kelp. We had no choice but to taste it and identify it. You are going to piss me off to death. You can't even use detection magic? You are just making excuses for stealing. We applied for special glass that can absorb most of the ultraviolet rays, and the measured sunlight spectrum after absorption is exactly the same as the moonlight spectrum. Your Majesty the Grand Duke, do you want to try it? Is this kind of light useful for your recovery? Look, there are still benefits to cooperating with Master Nordmark's experiments. Grand Duke Rimmer walked into the light collection room with great satisfaction, stretched out a palm to support the filtered sunlight. No, it's still too hot. Moreover, a kind of energy that is very useful to us in the moonlight has also been filtered out and has not entered this room. Ah, is that so? The researchers were in a hurry. Why is it too hot? The indoor temperature is too high? There is too much heat energy in the sun? Do we need to filter out infrared rays? Cool down. Cool down. Turn on the cooling circle. Change to a custom-made glass. This time, we also filter out infrared rays. Or, let's try prism refraction. Split the sunlight into various light waves, and then let the Grand Duke try them one by one. Which one is more useful to him? It's a pity that no one from the prophecy department came this time. Dividing the solar system into various light waves is what the astrology branch is good at originally. I remember they have done research in this area. Wait, I checked the literature, but I couldn't find it. Ask them again. Or ask the plastic energy department. They are better at playing with various basic particles. Maybe which kind of basic particles are more helpful for the recovery of the vampire. Every day there are new research ideas, every day there are new developments, and every day there are new things that make people laugh or cry. Grand Duke Rimmer was in the middle of it, watching these magicians noisy and not feeling lonely. Although he couldn't drink fresh, delicious, powerful, soul-scented human blood, a large amount of Warcraft blood also quenched his hunger and thirst a little. The only problem is, can you stop staring at me? Ignore and stare. Can you stop staring at me? Continuing to ignore him, his golden, hourglass-like eyes were staring at him without any trace. I'll hide and go to bed, okay? You won't enter my room, will you? You can't enter the room, but the feeling of being watched is still everywhere. Grand Duke Rimmer lay down and climbed out of the coffin and lay down again. He opened and closed the coffin that had been used for thousands of years. He still felt goosebumps coming out. He had no choice but to go find Gray. Special. Can you stop letting him stare at me like this? If this continues, I will have to go back to the Black Forest. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1817. Is it possible, I can't control this big boss? Gretel turned his face silently. He is a time dragon, a time dragon. Although I don't know what level the legend is, but judging from the fact that Elder Batista, who is the third level legend, is very polite to this person, I guess his combat power is at least not low? Don't say I can't control him. Even my teacher, the third level legendary Lord of Thunder, may not be able to control him. It is certainly possible to protect oneself, and there is no doubt about the teacher's fighting ability, but, killing him? That's the time dragon. Your Excellency Time Dragon Sains is not interested in anyone. Gretel could only smile. In fact, when I first came here not long ago, apart from me, he only looked at Senior Sister and Mr. Langer in a different light. At that time, Senior Sister and Mr. Langer were not legends yet. Is that so? The Grand Duke's eyes lit up. So, I can also be a legend. Then, where is the opportunity for me to become a legend? Is it with you? Generally speaking, if a vampire wants to advance into a legend, they have to dig deeper into their own bloodline. The source of every bloodline can be traced back to the original source. According to the vampires themselves, he is a true god. However, because the early records were vague and not quantitative, some magicians also believed that it was just a demigod. As for the teachings of the glorious Holy See, which have always been denounced as devils, it doesn't matter whether they are demigods, true gods, or some other level of power. In short, while digging for his own bloodline, he strives to absorb high-level blood and absorb the power of moonlight, while traveling, fighting, looking for various ancient tombs and other places, and even traveling to the plane of death to seek breakthroughs. Generally speaking, no matter how hard a vampire tries, their power will never exceed that of their parents who gave them true blood. However, in hundreds of years or 1,000 years, there will always be amazing and talented people who can break through the shackles. Can he? Can he do it? Grand Duke Rimmer was breathing rapidly. After becoming a vampire, apart from fighting and enjoying beauties, my heart, which had almost stopped beating, began to beat wildly. His upper limit is quite high. The person who gave him true blood was a prince, a being that humans call a legend. However, from the day I opened my eyes as a vampire, every step forward was difficult, and every step forward required my best effort. But now, he feels that he still has the momentum to move forward, but he can't move forward. Mage Nordmark, could this be an opportunity? Possibly. Is it a turning point? Generally speaking, the objects that Time Dragon is interested in are those people whose time has turned a corner. Maybe these people are more likely to be legendary, but there are not enough samples to be sure. I won't listen. Grand Duke Rimmer said he did not accept this statement. In short, the existence that is favored by the Time Dragon has a greater possibility of advancing to legend than others, right? I rely on you. You have traveled thousands of miles to get me here, and you still want me to work. You have to give me something. It takes an opportunity. I can't help it. Gretel waved his hands vigorously. I'm not a legend myself. It's not that easy to become a legend. Whether it's Senior Sister or Langer legend, I have accumulated enough and have a suitable project. As for you. He looked the Grand Duke of the vampire race up and down, nodded, and then shook his head. I really don't know what you rely on to advance, whether you can win the favor of the world by researching and exploring the truth of the world. But giving it a try is better than not trying at all, right? What to study? What to try? Of course it's blood, Greet said matter-of-factly. The components of blood: coagulation, hemolysis, breaking up blood clots, if possible, lowering blood lipids, lowering blood pressure, softening blood vessels. The use of blood and blood vessels by the necromancy system is simply crazy. There are boiling blood techniques and blood burning techniques that ignite blood, there are blood ice techniques that turn blood into ice, and there are blood vessel vines that urge the enemy's blood vessels to drill out of the body and wrap around them. Naturally, after being activated in this way, the necromancer system absolutely does not care whether the enemy is dead or not, and they will even feel that it is better for each enemy to die. However, Greed wants to do more, too much. What can be done about those with atherosclerosis, thinning and brittle blood vessels, calcification deposits, and shaky blood vessels that may rupture at any time, even those whose blood vessels only have reduced elasticity, causing diastolic blood pressure to rise? Is there any way to save them and make their blood vessels regain their elasticity, suppleness, and smoothness? If it were a previous life, for severely blocked coronary arteries, a stent or a bypass could be used, that is, a section of blood vessel was taken from an insignificant place to replace the original coronary blood vessel. You can also use rotational coronary atherectomy, which uses a high-speed rotating diamond drill to remove calcified coronary plaque and make the coronary arteries smoother. If it were now, Greet could preside over the operation, directly cut out the blocked coronary artery, and then guide the blood vessel to grow back. This surgery is not too difficult, all you need is a quick eye and a steady hand. It is not necessary to know limb regeneration. As long as they have enough understanding of the three-dimensional structure of blood vessels, low-level healers should be able to do it well. But is there any other way? Is there any way to treat the patient without opening the chest, without surgery, or causing major trauma? Magic is such a useful thing, and healing is such a useful thing. Can the difficulty of treatment be made as low as possible? Reduced to the point where both level 5 healers and level 3 healers can use it? If level 5 healers can be used, then a resident in a small town can ask the priest who presides over the temple for help. If level 3 healers can be used, then residents in the countryside may also be able to meet people walking in the streets. The pastor of. However, Gretel cannot handle these things by himself. He must unite the casters as much as possible, and if he can catch one, he will catch one. To cheat, to sneak attack, to seduce. If you can find a coolie and let them find ways to develop new spells. Look, you are here waiting for the research results. Anyway, you are idle. I can share the existing research on blood and blood vessels with you, but I also hope that you can help research some related magic. Maybe you can find opportunities for advancement in these studies. Grand Duke Rimmer really doesn't care about studying more. At the very least, the magic of adding oxygen to the blood and identifying blood types that the Nordmark mage developed a few years ago is still very interesting, and it has indeed expanded the knowledge of vampires. Then, he dived headlong into the information that was half a man's height. Hey, no. Why are there so many? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1818. Gretel really didn't hide anything from the Grand Duke. Blood oxygen, blood sugar, blood lipids, blood uric acid, serum, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, blood viscosity, arteries, veins, capillaries, blood vessel structure, blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure. From blood components to blood cells, from blood cells to blood vessels, all kinds of knowledge. If it were just text, it would probably be the 2 chapters about blood and vascular circulation in physiology. However, if you want to write down the pictures under the microscope, the methods, processes, and detailed steps of experiments and detection in the laboratory, it will be terrifyingly thick. However, in order for the Grand Duke to have sufficient knowledge about blood, Gretel also added the previous experimental records. A huge pile formed. It is conceivable that even if the Grand Duke wants to read these things day and night, he will not be able to finish them in 10 days and a half. Suppose he still wants to do all the experiments based on this knowledge, 3 months? Half a year? Moreover, you can read books at will, but experiments cannot be done at will. You need experimental equipment, and if you need experimental equipment that the Grand Duke does not have on hand, you must either find another experimental group to borrow it, or find an alchemist to help you rub it. Experimental materials are needed, mainly fresh blood, especially fresh human blood. When dissecting blood vessels, you can also mess with rabbit blood vessels, but taking blood pressure and blood type requires someone to cooperate. If we weren't on good terms with each other, who would draw your blood for experiments? And he couldn't rob, and he couldn't use magic to seduce others to provide it. He could only work hard to cooperate with the magicians in experiments. Whether it's helping to release hemolytic magic, helping to illuminate the simulated moonlight, or cutting the skin with a knife to experiment with your recovery speed under the simulated moonlight. These can be exchanged for research points, and because of the Grand Duke's status and the irreplaceability of these experiments, he can also be exchanged for quite high amounts of research points. And with research points, there are experimental equipment and experimental materials. Even rare experimental equipment like a microscope can be borrowed to observe your own blood. Grand Duke Rimmer squatted in front of the microscope, staring at the light screen projected by the tower spirit, almost in a daze. It turns out that my blood cells look like this, although they look similar under the microscope, they look very different. Blood oxygen saturation, my blood oxygen saturation is usually less than 10%, the Grand Duke raised his palms and stared at his purple nails. But it can climb rapidly under strenuous exercise. Is this the difference between undead creatures and living people? My body does not rely on human things to maintain vitality. It solidified quickly. The speed of solidification is much faster than the blood of a living person. Wait, it doesn't look like solidification. Is this the true blood of the vampire clan? Blood coagulation, the coagulation thrombus, it turns out to be like this. It is first built into a net, and then the net is filled little by little, and finally it becomes a very long strip. Then, if I want to remove it, I should. Hey, who's that inside? Outside the microscope room of the single room, someone started knocking on the door rudely. Come out quickly. Your time has come. Grand Duke Rimmel. Thinking of him as the great Duke of the Blood Clan, a half-legend, in his own territory, only the prince's status was above him. In the entire Black Forest, there were only a dozen or dozens of people with a higher status than him. When I arrived at Dragon Island and the Mage Tower of Master Nordmark, it turned out to be hey, who is that? Believe it or not, I will show off my momentum and hit you through the door. Nay, he can't. Not only was he unable to do so, Grand Duke Rimmer also honestly packed his things and honestly pushed the door open and went out. There was a flash of light from the corner of his eye, and a magician rushed in, rubbing his shoulder impatiently, seemingly using a spell such as acceleration. The next moment, he shouted angrily in the room. Who is that? Stop. How did you prepare the slices? The lens is corroded. Grand Duke. Run. Strangely, through such study, research, and experimentation, his mastery of his own power has actually reached a new level. The magic that was released from his hands to eliminate blood clots became more rounded and more comfortable. Why has your spell fluctuation changed again? It has changed again. The magician from the conjuration department came over to measure the spell fluctuation and pushed back the spell model. He was simply furious. The frequency of fluctuations and characteristic peaks have changed significantly. The change has exceeded 10%. The spell model we speculated before is completely unusable. Your Majesty, the Grand Duke, please, can't we just keep using one spell? Can we not change it again and again? In order to prevent you from writing spell models, we used fluctuations to work backwards, and we have been working overtime for a month. Now we have to tear them all down again. All over again. I just cried with anger. Why can't it be changed? Before Grand Duke Rimmel could speak, a necromancer rushed out from beside him and faced the conjuration magician with great momentum. When he cast a spell this time, the casting radius was reduced by half. The size of the spell's fluctuation, that is, the power consumption, was reduced to 1/10 of its original size. Don't you know what this means? Who doesn't know what it means? It means that the accuracy of spell casting is improved, it means that the threshold of spell casting is lowered, and it may even mean that a 5-ring spell is reduced to a 4th ring, or even a 3-ring. For such an improvement, shouldn't a group of conjuration magicians waste their previous work and start from scratch? But wait, I think I have some new inspiration. Grand Duke Rimmer suddenly froze for a moment, turned around, click click click, and walked towards the inner room somewhat mechanically. His fingertips were stained with blood at some point. The mist rotates around the fingertips, changing from light red to bright red to black red, then from black red to bright red, from bright red to light red, and the cycle goes back and forth. Blood, coagulation, thrombosis, thrombolysis, my blood, my real blood, when it boils, it shouldn't be like this. He walked with 1 foot high and 1 foot low. Gradually, blood-colored mist rose up all over his body. Relying on instinct, he ran into the laboratory of the plastic energy department and into the room where the filtered moonlight was being debugged. Quick! Turn up the energy supply. Turn it up. Magicians. Isn't that right? This vampire is also going to advance. Hurry up and ask Philby Legend to come back and take charge. Where did the Legend of Langer go? Do you want to ask him to come back with you? There is also Mage Nordmark. Do you want to ask him to stay away for a while? Are we going to retreat? Where to withdraw? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1819. Senior Sister Philby stepped out of the portal, immediately sat down on the top of the Mage Tower, and took over the management of the Mage Tower. The mental power unfolds, and connected with the jumping electric field, it covers it in a mighty way. Bloodlines. That's a vampire. Since the Parliament has standardized written records, no vampire has advanced on the territory of the Parliament. Who knows what will happen when he advances? Who knows whether he will suck blood on a large scale? No matter what, he will suck up all the flesh and blood within 1 kilometer of the center of the ball. Cyrilla is still sleeping on the top of the Mage Tower. And this cannot be solved by negotiation and communication. Even the energy frenzy caused by the magician's advanced legend is not something he can control himself. As for vampires, because a large proportion of them rely on instinct to advance, it is easier for them to be in a state of ignorance during the advancement process. Because of his ignorance, it may not be useful to talk to him in advance, so he had to ask Philby to come over and take precautions. At the same time, Greet and the magicians put aside all their work and rushed out. Not only the magicians, but also the experimental animals and even the undead creatures all retreated to 1 kilometer away. Who knows if the vampires will absorb undead creatures when they advance? What if? Only Philby was left, opening her electric field and sitting on the top of the Mage Tower. She lowered her eyebrows and lowered her eyes, feeling the energy changes in the entire Mage Tower. She also stared at the energy scan coming from the tower spirit report, smiled slightly, and then shook her head. Little Gretel is really, and these guys are too panicked and can't do anything. You want to bring me back with such a little movement? Obviously, they are still far from a legend. But you can't blame those magicians. Half-step legend to advance to legend, the movements triggered are all kinds of strange. Only magicians from the same sect and studying in the same direction will have some similarities. Like a vampire, ordinary magicians cannot see clearly at the beginning whether he has become a legend or just improved a little bit in power. Only a legend, condescending, can tell at a glance. This vampire is just a little bit more powerful. Maybe there will be a bigger improvement, such as going from 15% at level 19 to 20% at level 19 in one step. However, it is still early to get to the level of a legendary level. It is still early. She sat calmly for half an hour, then called Gretel back, and under her care, they felt the changes in the vampire together. In the room with the special glass roof, blood mist billowed, almost rising from the roof. In fact, although everyone has evacuated, there are still magicians and wizard towers communicating remotely, allowing the tower spirit to control the lens next to the glass top to tilt continuously. Concentrate, and concentrate the sunlight to the roof, and then supply it to the room for the Grand Duke's advancement. The energy of moonlight is so much weaker than that of sunlight. Is the concentrated sunlight enough after being filtered? It seemed that it was not enough. After the blazing sunlight entered the room, it was completely swallowed up by the blood mist, and could not break through the increasingly thick blood mist at all. The blood mist was also churning more and more violently, and even, under Philby's mental perception, it seemed to rush out of the room, stretch outward, and swallow energy. Well, it seems that this vampire Grand Duke is really in urgent need of energy. Philby looked at it with interest for a while, then suddenly stretched out her hand and moved a little lower. Gretel watched a gust of wind blowing outside, and then the air gathered, twisted, and changed. More sunlight, a wider range of sunlight, was gathered by the invisible lens, and concentrated into the room with a special glass roof. Finally, the blood mist in the room no longer expanded outwards, but turned into a ball, gathering tightly around the Grand Duke. And that big ball quickly changed from bright red to dark red, from dark red to black red. It seems that he got a lot of benefits this time, Philby sighed. I asked, how did you deceive him? Why do people advance so quickly when you get them? First of all, he is a vampire, not a human being. Greet refuted the senior sister's words with a straight face. Secondly, I gave him some knowledge and asked him to help me develop magic. I just hope that he can quickly develop the spell I want, at least, get the spell I want. Knowledge, knowledge, knowledge again. Philby turned her head and looked at the thick pile of documents on Gretel's desk. She flipped through them and felt a little dizzy. She couldn't help but gasp. You've given him so much knowledge, just take it easy, that's a vampire. What if he learns these things and uses them to deal with humans? I'm not afraid of dealing with humans. Gretel raised his head and smiled. The vampires have a lot of things to deal with them. Strong ultraviolet rays, strong gamma rays. Now, I hope he can devote himself to medicine as much as possible, so that he can quickly come up with what I want. Medicine, medicine, medicine again. Philby muttered a few words silently, and began to concentrate on feeling the changes in the blood mist in the room. The senior sister and brother sat opposite each other for a long time, and Gretel had approved more than 10 procedures in a row. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and a voice exploded from the glass room, rising into the air. Whoosh, deng deng, wait for the light, deng deng, wait for the light. Gretel muttered silently. I saw the figure dancing, flying from the ground to the top of the mage tower, and then continuing to shoot upwards. After a long time, I swayed and swayed, drifted to the window of the mage tower, and looked at each other with Gretel. I figured it out. I figured it out. Grand Duke Rimmer tried knocking on the window of the mage tower twice, but failed, and began to shout at the top of his lungs. Mage Nordmark, I figured out the spell model you want. I'll write it out for you right now, he shouted twice, sank down, and then floated up again. What other projects do you have for me? What other projects do you have? Come over with as many projects as you can. Give me as many as you want. I will make them all for you. I can advance to legend, but it all depends on you. After saying that, he turned into a bat and pounced down. As if the bat wasn't fast enough, it turned into a ball of blood mist and rushed towards the entrance of the mage tower. From the looks of it, he was probably looking for a place to write the spell model Gretel wanted. If you borrow something, you must repay it. It's not difficult to borrow again. Only after the old spell models are released and the problem solved can we get new projects and new knowledge. Before he finished writing, a roar came after him. Gretel couldn't tell who it was just by listening to the voice, but it was definitely an alchemist. Who is that? Glass. All the glass was blown up for you. Pay. If you don't pay double, don't think about me getting you a new one. Thanks to Ed for the 500 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1820. Grand Duke Rimmer was extremely excited. He had read about blood, its components, coagulation process, and coagulation function in the Black Forest, but only briefly. He compared it with himself and felt it was different, so he didn't care about it. However, when he arrived at Dragon Island, he got the latest knowledge and was able to do experiments with his own hands, and he could even do experiments with his own blood. The blood that usually flows in the body, as well as the real blood stored deep in the blood vessels, can be extracted, smeared, microscopically examined, and various experiments performed to understand the details of one's own power. This is something he, as a vampire, didn't know before. After understanding this, he felt that he had a deeper grasp of his own power and could absorb even more power. Not to mention, based on his observations of coagulation and thrombi, he felt the fundamentals of thrombolysis, dismantling the skeleton composed of proteins, and allowing the coagulated and precipitated cells in the skeleton to be washed away with the blood. With this understanding, the thrombolytic magic he released required less power, and the coverage range was more precise. Moreover, the moment he figured out the things he had never understood and constructed a complete spell model, he felt a powerful force, kinder than the blood of his ancestors and warmer than the body temperature of a living person, coming across the sky and injecting it into his body. And the power that has been unable to be improved for a long time has actually been improved. Studying, researching, creating, these jobs that have been ridiculed by the vampires for a long time, human magicians can only do the work, while the vampires only need to dig out their own bloodline. It is actually effective. Since it is effective, we must continue on this path. Grand Duke Rimmel handed over the latest spell model, received 3,000 research points from the Mage Tower, and lost another 3,500 points. Even though not all of a microscope is broken, it still costs 2,500 points to repair. The specially made glass roof was also made by an 18th level alchemist. Great efforts were made in material testing, blending and lens curvature calculation. Create a new one and get 1,000 research points. Grand Duke Rimmer doesn't want to bask in the moon, but if he wants to bask in the moon, and wants to use the sun as a moon, this thing is inevitable. Just because he cooperates with the research work and the treatment work of the Nordmark mage, if he goes to find someone to customize it alone, he has no idea whether they will pay attention to him or not. However, Grand Duke Rimmer did not find it too expensive and felt that it's over, I'll pay for it this time. After handing over the spell model and receiving an instruction to dissect blood vessels and try to solve the problem of vascular calcification, he left happily. It was impossible to bask in the moon as soon as possible. His moon house was moved to the wilderness and rebuilt, at least 1 kilometer away from any place with people or experimental animals. Gretel never wants to happen again when he breaks through and the entire Mage Tower retreats to escape. Cyrilla is still sleeping on top of the Mage Tower. Not every time, you can find a senior sister to save your life. No matter what breakthroughs you make in your research or inventions, if you want to advance, you have to absorb a lot of energy. If you want energy, go to the moon house 1 kilometer away. The Grand Duke had no objection to the move. Gretel, on the other hand, began to organize manpower to test the newly obtained magic. What is the range of this spell? How small can it be? Can it be done with a diameter of 0.5 mm and a length of 3 mm? How big can it be? Covering the heart of a rabbit? Can it cover the whole body of a rabbit? Can it cover the whole body of a pig? Can it sweep away all microthrombi in one go? How to locate? In addition to mental positioning, are there any auxiliary means? Can you burn it, make a scroll, or even make a treatment device, so that when you see someone with a heart attack or cerebral infarction, you can push it in and click on it? Will sweeping out the blood clots lead to abnormal coagulation function? Will Warcraft be resistant to this kind of spell? Will the same spell output, covering the same area and the same size of blood clots, produce the same effect on different levels of monsters. The top moves his mouth, the bottom runs and breaks his legs. What's more, what Greet needs to test is not just one project, but 7 or 8 dozen projects. Nature priests, necromancers, and conjuration healers were all busy and busy. Animals need to be raised, animals need to be tested, blood needs to be drawn, injections need to be given, comfort needs to be given, and dissections must be done if necessary. Work harder. Everyone, work harder. Greet himself took the lead and rushed to the front line of the magic experiment. We have finalized this treatment spell. In the future, if a patient has a heart attack or cerebral infarction, we can use a spell to directly cure it. Isn't this a good thing? If you do good deeds, there will be gifts from the whole world. In case of myocardial infarction, there is no need to slowly dissolve thrombosis, no need to queue up in the cath lab, no need to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. Life-saving magic can be performed within 1 minute. It is even better for cerebral infarction. It can be opened quickly so that brain cells can quickly get nutrients and gain valuable rescue time. We no longer have to watch people die without being able to save them, we no longer have to be hemiplegic, paralyzed, unable to speak or walk, and we have to slowly recover. It is said that some magicians lost control of their powers after cerebral infarction and exploded directly. How many people can be saved and how many tragedies will not happen? In order to achieve the dream and vision described by Gretel, the magicians and nature priests could only work hard to further refine and improve the spell model made by the Blood Grand Duke. If you can be sure that this thing does not affect blood coagulation, then if a patient comes in and scans his head, everything from myocardial infarction, cerebral infarction, pulmonary embolism, and deep vein thrombosis can be eliminated. By then, the chest pain center and stroke center will lose more than half of their patients. You don't even need to take it to the hospital in an ambulance, the healer can go over and scan it, or just keep a scroll at home. The magicians didn't know the vision in Greet's heart, so they could only work hard. Very unexpectedly, this kind of busyness was welcomed by a large number of magicians up and down the magic tower. The food in the mage tower has improved recently. Yes, there is more Warcraft meat. Hiccup. Speaking of which, although we are magicians, not warriors, eating more Warcraft meat is still good for us to improve our physique. I just hope they can make some delicious monsters. Water arrow rabbits, snow sheep, and blue-spotted golden conger eels are pretty good. Last time, they made a frost tiger, and the meat was so unpalatable, it was so delicious. Can't we give these unpalatable monsters to the soldiers? Give them to the indigenous warriors who help us catch monsters, such as frost giants and so on? They will be very happy to eat them. They are not picky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1821. Mage Nordmark has sent new documents. This time it's a new spell, and the diagnostic instructions corresponding to the spell. Let me take a look. Oh, the spell model doesn't look difficult, and the diagnostic instructions are so thick. Oak Grove Hospital was crowded with people. After a day's work, the therapists packed up their things and prepared to hand over to their colleagues on the night shift, chatting quietly. Some people plan to meet up for a drink, some plan to go see the new opera on Tulip Avenue, and of course, some people plan to use the equipment in the hospital and the Mage Tower to race against time to conduct a few more experiments. Do experiments here. The instruments and some not so expensive consumables are from the hospital. You don't have to queue up, crowd around, or look at the faces of other magicians. How great! Compared to going to the White Tower and queuing up to rent instruments, or going to some public mage towers and queuing up to rent instruments, the conditions for doing research in a hospital are much better. Just when everyone was exchanging information for the day and preparing to disband, a young mage rushed out of the mage tower holding a thick stack of documents and quickly walked into the workshop where the healers gathered. This spell is used to save patients with myocardial infarction, cerebral infarction, and various blood clots. Animal experiments have been completed. Master Nordmark hopes that we can master it as soon as possible and explore its usage specifications in treating humans as soon as possible. There are new spells. There is a new mission. All the busy magicians stopped. I wanted to go for a drink, but I grabbed my colleague who I had met for a drink together. Those who want to go to the opera took out their magic communication device and started to communicate. Hey, I'm not going to the opera today. Yes, I can give you the tickets, but you have to get them yourself. Those who wanted to do experiments also stopped silently. Experiments. Experimentation is important, but learning new healing magic is even more important. There was even a magician who raced against time to take out his communication device. Hello? Teacher. The Nordmark mage has released a new healing spell. Yes, new. We still need to explore how to use it, but this is a brand new healing spell. Okay, I'll save a seat for you. In the Oak Forest Hospital, with a much meager income than spellcasters of the same level, I went to treat the stinky poor people. Sometimes I looked at them so pitifully that I couldn't help but use my salary to buy them food. What are you picturing? The picture is that there are always new spells to learn, the picture is the good experimental conditions, the picture is the advancement speed that is more than twice as fast as outside, and the picture is the reputation of from Oak Grove Medical Clinic. Even if you no longer want to work in a medical clinic, you want to resign and start an independent business, or you want to go back to your hometown to start a business, with a certificate that says I have worked at Oak Grove Medical Clinic for a certain number of years and am good at certain aspects of treatment, it will be smoother than others. The probability of getting investment from the local mage tower and being hired by a noble to come to see a doctor is several times higher than that of other healers. Tidy up the conference hall. Set up the big screen for study. Put the files for everyone. The current host of Oak Grove Medical Clinic, Lin Ann's oldest disciple, immediately stopped leaving get off work and raised his voice. Let the canteen prepare meals and send them to the conference hall. Prepare meals per person. Prepare as many meals as there are spellcasters in the medical center. Colleagues on duty, don't worry, there will be a copy for you. The documents passed by Master Nordmark are kept in the Master Tower. You can read them at any time after get off work. The animal team also came in to take a look. Although it is for human use, we estimate that we still have to start with animal experiments first. The spellcasters rushed into the conference room with chaotic steps. There is no need to compete for seats, the sound of the playback is loud enough, everyone can hear clearly. As for the screen, if you really can't see clearly, you can also open the secret eye. In fact, among this group of healers, there are quite a lot of people with myopia, they read too much and are too lazy to change their glasses, and they don't have the heart to gouge out their eyes and then use limb regeneration technique to grow a new pair. This method can indeed solve myopia. As long as it is properly protected and not wasted in the future, myopia and presbyopia can be eradicated, but the cost is too high. If you are not a high-level spellcaster above the 7th level, and you have a friend who is a healer who can trust you with life and death, you will never be able to afford such an expense. No one in this group of middle-level and low-level healers is worthy of using this method. No. The spell model is so complicated. As soon as the playback work started, high and low wails could be heard in the conference room. The entire spell model, horizontal and vertical, curved, looked like a ball of yarn messed up by a cat, set on an indescribable monster made of scrap steel bars. As for the mathematical description related to the spell model, the light of the projection device flashed, and 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages were turned. No. How long does it take to learn this? The low-level healers, especially those from the temple, have begun to wail. The magicians looked quite at ease. Especially after receiving news from his disciples, Archmage Morton, the red-robed conjuration healer who came over from Babel Tower, squinted his eyes and nodded gently. It's okay, okay. At first glance, it doesn't look more complicated than the three-ring fireball technique. Should he be able to successfully release it after giving him 2 days to study it? Sure enough, when the spell model played to the end, a summary narrative appeared. So far, this spell has been tentatively rated as a three-ring magic based on the complexity of the model and the intensity of the spell's fluctuations. However, given the novelty of the spell, if you don't have a good understanding of the principle, the learning difficulty may increase. In addition, we are also further researching and splitting it, hoping to reduce the difficulty of spell casting and transform it into a second-level spell or even a simpler spell. Of course, forget it if you really can't change it. Greet expressed his calmness about this. Myocardial infarction, cerebral infarction, if you apply a spell, you can be cured immediately. There is no extremely long recovery period, no need for high-value consumables, no need to install stents and take lifelong medication. What else do you want? In the previous life, even if the difficulty of the spell was increased to the 7th or 8th level, do you think those patients would flock to it? Of course, if it is really mentioned that the cost of casting the spell is so high, the Medical Insurance Bureau will probably step in to bargain for the soul. Of course, Dragon Island is good for everything, except that there are few people, especially humans. It is unlikely that any of the magicians who came to Dragon Island would have a heart attack or cerebral infarction in a short period of time. Greet could only pack up the spell and throw it to Oak Grove Hospital, where the healers could try it for him. And soon, new good news came from Nevis. Mage Nordmark. Your spell is really useful. You saved a magician who failed to advance. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1822. As a precious healing mage, Archmage Morton receives a special allowance from the Council all year round, 1,000 contribution points per month. In addition to research funds, magic level subsidies, arcane level subsidies, research results rewards, etc., there is an additional healer special allowance of 1,000 contribution points per month. Of course, this subsidy is not without cost. In return for receiving the allowance, Archmage Morton must spend 10 days a month stationed at the top of Igor Peak to solve various problems for the magicians. It can be as minor as toothache, headache, stomachache and other minor illnesses. Gretel, toothache may be a symptom of myocardial infarction, it can kill people. Headache may be a symptom of stroke, it can kill people. Stomach pain is an acute abdomen, it can also kill people of. It's so big that a certain spellcaster's experiment exploded and he was seriously injured. A certain spellcaster almost killed himself after eating strange spellcasting materials. A certain spellcaster failed to meditate and his head was about to explode. For Archmage Morton, who is not married anyway and lives in the laboratory every day, he is happy to station at Mount Igor for 30 days a month and receive 3 times the treatment allowance. Isn't this money for nothing? In addition to being invited to visit doctors, give lectures, go to Oak Forest Hospital to learn new treatment spells, and go to Oak Forest Hospital to practice new treatment spells, anyway, he will not leave Igor Peak. Obviously, for Parliament, such subsidies are still very important. Look, at this moment, another invisible servant screamed and rushed down, spinning around Archmage Morton's window. Emergency rescue. Please go quickly. Emergency rescue. Please go quickly dash. Archmage Morton followed and rushed out. If this was Gretel's doctor in his previous life, he would have to bring a medical kit or something. The caster wouldn't even need this. Most of the inspections and treatments are integrated into spells and can be released with just a flick of the hand. The only person a spellcaster needs to take care of is himself. Archmage Morton rushed forward quickly under the guidance of the invisible servant who was constantly shouting as the red, blue, and white lights rotated. Wherever he went, everyone gave way, and even the mysterious lock on Igor Peak opened a passage specifically for him. Obviously, this special light color that represents emergency first aid and Gretel's bad taste have been spread from person to person and from thing to thing, and have formed a broad consensus in Nevis. Rush through the 10th floor, rush through the 20th floor, rush through the 50th floor. We're here. Come in here. Archmage Craig is waiting for rescue. Mr. Monkruth of Tallingham has already opened a long French window in advance. Archmage Morton tilted his flight angle and rushed directly into the Tower of Babel. Immediately, he cast an acceleration spell on his body and followed the invisible servant forward. Here. Here, here. The healers are coming. Get out of the way. The invisible servant, who was no longer invisible, shouted and rushed over. The crowd parted like a tide, revealing a meditation room with an open door. The surging spell fluctuations rushed toward him. Archmage Morton stopped suddenly and was dangerously stuck at the door of the meditation room. Tisk tisk, this is. Failed to meditate? Psychic riot? Failed to construct a spell in the meditation world? The conflict between the cognitive world and the real world leads to loss of mental power? Magicians are really a dangerous profession. Don't look at a group of high-level mages who don't travel around the world, go on adventures, fight all kinds of monsters, or go to the battlefield. Danger will fall from the sky just sitting at home. What happened? When did you find out? How long has he been like this? Archmage Morton asked repeatedly. While asking, he used his mental energy to observe the high-level mage lying on the ground. It was very miserable. The mental power fluctuations were as chaotic as a volcanic eruption, completely without order and direction. It seems as if there is extremely powerful spiritual power accumulated somewhere, constantly radiating outwards and rushing outwards. It's so easy to blow up your brain with this devilish look. Archmage Morton frowned. The patient's mental power is much stronger than his, especially when the mental power is out of control. It is not something he can guide or comfort. What he can do now is. Archmage Craig has a nosebleed. The eyes are bleeding too. Oops, his brain won't explode. Get out of the way. Those who are not at a high level or have insufficient defense, leave this corridor. Archmage Morton, look. I don't have any opinion either. Archmage Morton thought helplessly. In this case, the healer can only provide the most basic life support to help the patient take a breath and help the patient survive. In the final analysis, the sorting out of mental power depends on the magician himself. As a healer, all he can do now is treat serious injuries. Very good. Once the healing spell passed, the blood flowing out of Archmage Craig's nose and eyes slowed down a little and tended to stop. Well, according to Little Gretel, according to Master Nordmark, this is because the blood pressure is too high, the intracranial pressure is too high, causing the blood vessels to burst. A large amount of blood pours into places where it should not exist, causing oppression on brain cells and various functional parts, causing central nervous system disorders, breathing and heartbeat disorders, coma, incontinence, and of course, a series of other symptoms. Then, mental disorders are also inevitable. In order to save himself, the magician's mental power will explode at this time and work desperately. However, if consciousness disappears, these unconstrained mental powers may cause greater trouble. Cure serious injuries. Cure serious injuries. Cure serious injuries. Soothe. Tranquility. He threw out a lot of healing spells in one breath. Stop bleeding, stop cerebral hemorrhage, lower blood pressure, lower blood pressure. When blood pressure comes down, intracranial pressure can also come down. By the way, do you need to do decompression? For example, make a hole in the head to drain the cerebral hemorrhage and cerebrospinal fluid. Or, according to what Master Nordmark said, the brain fluid and the fluid in the spine are connected. How can we make a hole in the spine to drain out the fluid? It seems that it cannot be induced casually. Master Nordmark said that if the drainage is too fast and the brain is decompressed too quickly, big problems will occur. What did he say at that time? In short, stop the bleeding, stop the bleeding, stop the bleeding quickly. Then what? Then, quickly remove those clots, overcoagulated blood clots, and let fresh blood flow in to provide nutrients to brain cells. Yes, that latest spell, the latest, yet to be named, thrombolytic spell. Come. Archmage Morton pointed forward, and a light red light enveloped Archmage Craig's head. This went back and forth, for 5 or 6 hours. Wake up, wake up. Archmage Craig is awake. It's not easy, I saved my life. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1823. During the meditation process of a magician, especially when the meditation is not going well or the advancement is not smooth, the mental power is under great pressure, which often leads to a rapid increase in blood pressure. On this topic, we conducted a large-scale observation experiment and invited a team of 1,000 spellcasters from mage apprentices to level 15 archmages to participate. The experimental results are shown in the table below. Greed happily flipped through the newly transferred papers. Not to mention, Master Morton is really awesome. This paper is very well written from the conception, to the research scope, to the research process and research results. It is true that when his disciple's disciple stole penicillin, he did not pursue him fiercely. Instead, he invited the Archmage to join in the cooperation and study the development and use of penicillin together. Look, we have one more comrade, right? The scope of application of healing techniques is so broad, and the topics that need to be studied are endless. The more fellow travelers, the better. How could he have researched so much on his own? Moreover, as the senior therapist of the council, Archmage Morton has extremely extensive connections and deep roots in the council. Just looking at this topic, the researchers found 1,000 people from 8 schools of thought. You need to book a meditation room, you need a healer to help take care of it, the control system measures brain waves by the way, and the necromancer is squatting next to him, ready to open the skull at any time. This network and organizational ability still depend on the veteran healer. It's not impossible for Gretel to think about it, but considering how troublesome it would be for him to do it himself, he might as well leave it to others. Moreover, don't papers written by others also have to be published in Life? We created a map of the meditation process and the rise and fall of blood pressure. As can be seen from the figure below, when meditation goes well, blood pressure usually rises slightly. When meditation is about to fail and is dangerous, blood pressure usually rises sharply. Of course, this is also related to the magician's cardiovascular and cerebrovascular conditions, and we need to judge based on his basic blood pressure. Greed let out a long breath. So, in the future, when a magician meditates, in addition to the life energy monitor, there will be an additional blood pressure monitor in the meditation room. Monitor and call the police, the mage tower intervenes immediately, and treatment is in place immediately. If you can save one, it's one, if you can save a pair, it's a pair. So, first of all, we advocate starting regular physical examinations for magicians. At the very least, there must be regular monitoring of blood pressure. For some magicians whose daily blood pressure is too high, it is best to have early intervention. Fortunately, blood pressure monitors and a full set of monitoring magic had been developed before. As long as the alchemists are authorized to produce in large quantities, I think it will soon be possible for magicians, nobles, and wealthy businessmen to all have one. Secondly, we advocate that magicians apply for monitoring care during the meditation process, especially when preparing to advance in the meditation room, which will hopefully reduce the probability of death or injury after failure. So will this become standard? Will it become a standard care service sold externally by councils? Or, become a benefit given by the parliament to magicians, especially core magicians? If government procurement, no, parliamentary procurement can be achieved, a lower price is acceptable. As for centralized procurement, the important thing is, should this kind of care service be covered by medical insurance? Greet thought happily. However, after turning the page, his smiling face dropped. However, 30% of the magicians who participated in the experiment reported that monitoring affected their meditation, especially in preparatory advanced meditation, which hindered their concentration. To this end, we hope to modify the spell model to minimize spell fluctuations, especially spell fluctuations that transmit information, so as not to interfere with the magician's meditation. No. Still want to change? How to modify such a small spell? Forget it, write a note and leave it to the conjuration department. This kind of work is what the conjuration department is best at. I'm already an 18th level high-level mage, and it's time to let my subordinates do the work. Gretel read the entire paper from beginning to end and felt that Archmage Morton's entire idea was very good. Of course, if it is a non-emergency situation, it is better to do a CT before hemostasis and thrombolysis, which will not only help accumulate cases but also help improve the accuracy of the technique. But this is not an emergency. Don't worry about casting accuracy and casting consumption. If you can save someone, you can save someone. If you can pull someone up, you can pull someone up. If the spell reserves are really not enough, you can also make scrolls and trigger spell equipment. Greet nodded with satisfaction and began to write a reply to Archmage Morton. As for the promotion of this spell, I leave it to you and the healing mages in Nevis. I am on Dragon Island and will be working on another research project, how to reduce excessive intracranial pressure. Regarding this, I have several directions and hope to get your opinions. Greet's reply letter soon reached the hands of Archmage Morton. Regarding whether the Parliament should set up a special monitoring device to improve the safety of magicians as they advanced, Gretel generously threw it to them and went to argue with the Parliament. The publication of this paper soon aroused various reactions from various forces in Nevis and even the Kingdom of Kent. First, send someone to learn this spell and promote it. Elder Tapros of the Natural Order read the paper carefully from beginning to end. Thrombolysis, thrombolysis. I always feel that there are more problems in cerebral hemorrhage and cerebral infarction, which cannot be solved by thrombolysis alone. Is this spell useful for warriors? In more than one God of War temple, bishops and archbishops held papers, reading from beginning to end, and then from end to end. Theoretically, when a warrior advances, inflating his blood will also cause a sharp increase in blood pressure, but heart rate, muscles, etc., may be more important. Should we write a letter and ask Master Nordmark? The surveillance and first aid magic he developed last time for impacting knights is still very useful. Will advanced meditation and using magician's spell monitoring affect divine grace? The spring water temple was more confused. Theoretically, the priest who is the most pious, has the most correct understanding of God's way, and has received the most divine grace is the most likely to advance, right? I went to another road, will there be any problem? The spring water temple is just struggling, not completely resisting. After all, their cooperation with the Parliament can be considered a long-term one, and their cooperation with Master Nordmark has lasted for so many years. Until now, there are priests in the Spring Temple, training regularly at Oak Grove Hospital, waiting to get the certificate of Caesarean section doctor. However, the glorious Holy See completely resisted. Without the Pope's words, the clergy below spontaneously abandoned this seemingly safe method of assistance. Using a magician's method to ensure safety? This is blasphemy. Unfortunately, the decision has been made here, but the Magic Council over there is still thinking bitterly. How can we reveal to them that the essence of this spell is related to the vampire clan? We can't directly say, there is a vampire clan Grand Duke to help with the research and development, nor can we reveal our in-depth cooperation with the vampire clan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1824. The spirit cannot leave the body, and the body cannot leave the spirit. The magician's mental power is inseparable from the magician's brain cells and nerve cells. A large number of brain cells die, or the brain cells are under great pressure and work in an inefficient state, which will seriously affect the mental power. Regarding this, we have conducted experiments on a variety of monsters, artificially creating states such as cerebral ischemia and intracranial hypertension, and measuring their mental power. After Archmage Morton's paper was published, the next issue of Life published Gretel's paper on brain cells and intracranial pressure. We measured the recent mental power and long-term mental power of these monsters, due to the struggle for survival, in the process of blocking cerebral blood vessels and increasing intracranial pressure. Monsters often burst out with extremely high but disordered mental power. However, after recovery, a damaged brain will almost always bring about a decline in mental strength. Therefore, we believe that forcing the limit at the expense of brain cell damage will damage future promotion potential. But if we don't force the impact, there won't even be now. Archmage Morton sighed and put down the new issue of Life. You are truly the darling of the world. You are so blessed, only such a spellcaster can say the words "don't compromise your future potential" without any burden. In any case, this paper still aroused considerable repercussions in the Magic Council. It is impossible to immediately promote blood pressure monitoring and medical care in meditation rooms. There is too little preliminary research and the time is not yet ripe. However, the Magic Council's Research Funding Review Department received applications for 5 projects within 1 day. Study the relationship between brain damage and brain waves, study the relationship between brain damage and mental power, study the damage to the brain caused by forced elevation during meditation. For a time, the control system suddenly became popular, and researchers rushed to show their favor. Your research on the brain and mental power is so useful. Your research results, your research methods, and your research equipment are very helpful to us. Come on, join our group. At the same time, the plastic energy system has also become popular. Researchers suddenly discovered that magnetic resonance is a better way to study the state of brain cells than detecting magic spiral scans. And where is magnetic resonance? There is one in Nordmark's Mage Tower and one in the hospital. Gone. Still want a third one? Come on, go and ask for the plastic energy department. A larger magnetic field and faster computing speed. Only the plastic energy system can meet these requirements. Even if the alchemists can create it, they still need high-level mages of the plasticity department to design, give guidance, install, and debug. Another paper in Life is not so pleasant. In this paper, Greet seriously discussed the impact of high intracranial pressure on the brain. Excessive intracranial pressure may cause different symptoms depending on the acute increase and chronic increase. Here, we mainly discuss the acute increase in intracranial pressure caused by meditation accidents. An acute increase in intracranial pressure can cause extremely severe headaches, often causing disturbances in consciousness and changes in vital signs, may cause vision loss and concentric narrowing of the visual field. It often causes epilepsy, which can be a tonic spasm attack, and brain herniation may occur within a few hours. What a headache! The immortal Lord banged his head. Although he had been transformed into an undead creature and no longer had a living body or soft and delicate brain tissue, these descriptions still made him feel the phantom pain in his brain. When meditating hard and pushing the boundaries, he also experienced severe headaches that were so painful that he wanted to die. Those convulsions, those visions of blackness, those dizziness, and those about to fall into coma. He has done that too. If you want to open your head and let the blood in your brain flow out, it will make you feel much better. There are several main ways to reduce intracranial pressure, using dehydration methods, such as diuretics, to drain fluid from the brain, cells, or interstitial spaces. It's so simple. Isn't it just dehydration? The tip of His Excellency the Immortal's skinny bone hand lit up with a faint light. The first level necromancy spell, Touch of Thirst. It seems like the damage is a bit high. If it hits a civilian, it's bad luck, and it's enough to kill someone. Otherwise, if this side is dehydrated, the other side should be treated quickly. How much dehydration damage can brain cells withstand? Or, reduce the power of this spell, reduce it, and reduce it again? Down to 1%, or even lower. We are conducting research on thirst touch. However, until progress is made, we can only use drugs and surgical methods, such as cerebrospinal fluid drainage. It should be noted that if the intracranial pressure drops too fast, it will also cause the ventricles to shrink too quickly, causing the brain tissue to collapse, which may cause the brain surface and intracerebral blood vessels to pull, rupture and bleed. What? Is it so troublesome? The magic light on the immortal Lord's fingertips gradually faded away. It's not good if it's fast, it's not good if it's slow. Why is magic treatment so troublesome? In other words, if there is an unlucky guy who goes crazy with mental energy and high intracranial pressure caused by high blood pressure, you can't just throw thirst touch over, you need to do it step by step carefully. The casting weight must be controlled very, very carefully. So let the little guys do this kind of thing. Anyway, there are also a group of necromancers on Dragon Island. Let them cooperate with little Gretel to slowly study and dismantle it. Is it so troublesome? In the capital of the King of Kent, Duke Ballard, the Lord Privy Seal, put down the new issue of Life and let out a long sigh. If it is just a cerebral hemorrhage, and a thrombus will form and block the blood vessels after the hemorrhage, then repeated treatment and thrombolytic spells can always save a small life. However, just stopping bleeding and thrombolysis will not make the excess fluid in the brain suddenly disappear. If intracranial pressure is involved, then it is not a problem that the combination of treatment and thrombolysis can solve. Thirst touch has not been successfully improved, and suitable drugs have not been successfully developed. Cerebrospinal fluid drainage and decompression, need to poke a tube from the back into the spine? It sounds very scary. Moreover, even if you are not a well-trained healer, you cannot do this. If he himself is infected at some point, it would be best to have a stronger healer sit in to facilitate early treatment. The question is, how to hire a healer? Is it enough to be a disciple of Master Nordmark? The Queen's Chancellor of the Royal Seal naturally had enough contacts and reached Long Island in a roundabout way. 5 days later, the meaning of Master Nordmark came from the Mage Tower on Dragon Island. It's impossible for him to come here by himself. If his disciples, trained healers, want to come to the royal capital, he won't stop him. However, given that treatment is an empirical work, it would be best to set up a treatment institution for the public, especially for the poor, so that the therapists can accumulate experience as much as possible. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1825. Chapter 1820 Gretel's ambition to spread medical clinics across the country. Greet has also been studying how to expand the medical clinic. Spread it out deeply. Shop in big cities, shop in every county, shop in every small town like Heartland City. Even, if possible, spread out to village after village. There was once a country, there was a nation, which was in poverty and had just stood up from the war, and tried its best to make every village in it have healers to take care of it. But that's hard. It's very difficult. Moreover, to accomplish such a thing, we need a great leader, a great party, and thousands of people who are willing to sacrifice themselves, keep their feet on the ground, sink to the front line, and sink to the poorest patients. Go. Greet himself knows that he is not this kind of talent, and he has no ability to be this kind of talent. Let him go to Africa to do medical work for a year in order to be promoted to deputy director, no problem. He needs to spend his whole life, or at least 10 or 8 years, working in rural areas to provide medical services. Thank you, sorry, bye. I would rather lie down or change jobs. Anyway, I am already the deputy director. Moreover, in this world, Gretel has to face a problem. It is not that there is no healing power here, or in other words, it is not that there is no healing power that sinks into small cities and towns. There are temples, major temples, in cities, even in small cities, there is always one. In the town, there may not be a temple, but there will definitely be an altar, and it will be taken care of by the lowest level clergy, even if it is just a first level priest. Only in the village, there may not even be an altar, and we can only rely on the clergy to occasionally visit the countryside to spread God's favor. The real problem for patients is that these healing powers are not easily available, too expensive, just too expensive. A standard magical scroll, Cure Minor Wounds Divine Spell, 25 gold coins, a bottle of standard healing potion, Cure Minor Wounds, 50 gold coins. The reason why potions are more expensive than scrolls is because to use scrolls, you must at least be able to decipher the words on the scrolls and read the spells on the scrolls, which means that the user must be a spellcaster. As for the potion, it can be used by cats and dogs. Just twist it open and pour it into your mouth. If you are really anxious, you can also put the bottle directly into your mouth and then bite the bottle into pieces. Of course, what to do with that mouthful of glass slag afterwards is another story. And what can a treat minor injuries do? Replace a broken leg? Anyway, injuries like the broken liver that Gretel encountered when he first came to this world cannot be cured by cure minor injuries. As for broken legs or something like that, country people who break their legs would rather lie in bed for a few months to survive. 50 gold coins, or send the person to the temple and ask a priest to take action. The standard treatment price is 25 gold coins, which means that the family will be bankrupt, or even bankrupt and unable to collect the money. When Gretel just woke up in this world, how much was all his savings, all the savings left to his son by his original father, a knight, an upper middle class man in the city? Not counting the armor and sword left to him by his original father, not counting the small house, not counting the box of books, it was just cash savings, not even half of 25 gold coins. If the poor people cannot come up with this money and are really very sick and cannot afford to pay, they will send the patient to the town to gamble their luck and see if the healer is willing to charge a small amount of money to help his family members with treatment. In fact, even this opportunity is very rare. Unless there is a break in farming, the poor people in the countryside cannot spare the time to send people to the city, nor can they borrow ox carts or horse-drawn carriages. And the poor in the city may not be able to put down their daily work and spend half a day alone to accompany their families to seek medical treatment, and in most cases, their medical treatment will be unsuccessful. Any idea? Is there any way to enable more civilians and poor people to afford medical treatment and receive medical care? Relying on the therapist's awareness and dedication is not enough. The healers in this world, except for a small number of herbalists, they are the helpless choice of the poor after they cannot get magical treatment, are all spellcasters, all superior to others. Their status is guaranteed by direct violence, and their status and income are directly related to the stability of this society. Suppressing them will cause a backlash that will plunge the entire society into turmoil. Greet bit her quill and frowned. He has been thinking about this problem for a long time and many ways. The only feasible option is to induce them with benefits. From him, a large number of spells were developed, a large number of healing spells with low levels, high difficulty in casting, and requiring sufficient training to master. Then, spread out these spells, spread them out again. Want to learn? Want to learn my unique magic at a very small cost? Do you want to learn these spells, which are very important for treating patients and maintaining your own status? Come for training at Oak Grove Hospital, come for training at other branch hospitals affiliated with Oak Grove Hospital. No money, no extra effort, just work at Oak Grove Hospital at a very low salary during the training period, and after returning from the course, treat a certain number of poor people at a lower price. 100 per year? 200? 300? Treat a certain number of poor people, and then teach a certain number of students, so that they can also treat a certain number of poor people at an affordable price. Thanks to the extraordinary power of this world, making a magical contract, taking a magical oath, or swearing an oath in the name of a god will generally not be violated. Such a chain reaction spreads virally, and future generations will be inexhaustible. By the way, develop some exclusive spells that are very important to the local elite in exchange for their support in the establishment of local medical clinics. Supplemented by the efforts of the magic industry to improve, some drugs are supplied in large quantities at low prices. For example, penicillin, streptomycin, oxytetracycline, erythromycin, various mycins. This should be fine, right? It should be able to take care of as many poor people as possible, right? Should enough poor people be able to get medical help when they are sick or injured? And to do this, he needs to develop more spells, more important spells, more universal spells. Everyone, work harder. Everyone, move. How is dry touch improved? Has the power been reduced to less than 1%? If that doesn't work, build a filtering device. Reduce the power of the spell. Reduce it to less than 1%. Animal experiments continue. Continue. Where is the rabbit? Is the rabbit enough? Boss, can we not eat dried rabbit meat today? Rabbit meat that has been drained of water using drying touch is so unpalatable.